I need a mover and a seconder to reconvene into open session. Moved by Councillor Deal, second by Councillor Steffler, that the council of the municipality of Huron East reconvene into open session at 6 p.m. All those in favor? And motion carries. For reporting out, council went into closed session to discuss matters that were subject to solicitor-client privilege, potential litigation affecting the municipality, and personal matters about identifiable individuals. We would like to acknowledge that the land we stand upon today is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the neutral peoples. Can I get a mover and a seconder for confirmation of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Wilby, second by Councillor Morrison, that the agenda for the regular meeting of council dated August 13th, 2024 be adopted as circulated. Just before we go on, normally Jess always has a spot for me. Oh, I missed it myself. Mayor's remarks. Couple things. Welcome back. It's been a while since we've got together. I was at the Tom Phillips event on Saturday at the Union or at the Legion for his 55 years service and also 150 years for the fire department in the municipality. It went pretty good. I did a few screw ups, but I was able to basically blame Marty for that. So that went over well. So Marty was nice enough to give me a bunch of facts. He had texted them to me. And I thought I could go up there and read the thing off my cell phone, which wasn't a good scenario because I'm trying to scroll it with one finger, keep it blowing up and holding a microphone in the other, which I didn't know I had to do at the time. So Tom and I, we were just kind of bantering back and forth for 45 seconds, but I think Tom really appreciated. When I was done, I did tell Tom he only had 45 minutes to talk, and a lot of people told me that there was no way that was going to happen. And I think I'd left about 25 minutes into his speech, and I'm not sure what year he was up to, but it was probably getting close to his birth. But I think he really appreciated everything that went on there, and that was good. Just one other minor little thing. I had landfill meeting today. Actually, the recycling board was the one, but when we entered into our agreement 6 years ago, we started out with all three partners would pay a third, a third, and a third, and the intent was we would review every year how much waste was actually coming from each of the individual partners to how much we pay towards it. Huron East's share of the waste that goes into the recycling center has actually dropped off, so we're down to now 25%. Now, I did make a motion and it got passed that what we would have is staff come back later in the year with possible wording of what to change so that when major purchases happen going forward, that we would take into consideration those calculations of what municipalities are actually using the center the most. So they would pay according to those percentages. To me, it's not appropriate to cover the day-to-day expenses because it's almost like having an insurance policy. We want the use of the facility there, so we need to be able to pay to have the employees there when we want to use it. So it would just be for capital purchases. Not that it'll make a huge difference, but it will make some, and it was easy to explain why our drop-off was. For people in Seaport, they probably remember we used to have bag tags. We used to have a private industry that used to pick them up and deliver the refuse to the center. But now we use blue water recycling. And so it's paid through our tax levy and we no longer have it going to Holmesville. So that was just one of the little things that came out of the meeting today. Okay. Did we do the agenda yet?
Yes, we did.
We did the agenda.
We are down to pecuniary interest.
Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest for any member of council today? Councillor Morrison.
8.11, I'm in one of the mentioned groups on accounts payable.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I get a mover and a seconder for minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor Chartrand and Councillor Deal. That the council of the municipality of Huron East approved the following council meeting minutes as circulated. That's the regular meeting of July 9th of 2024. Any comments or questions on those minutes? All those in favor? And motion carries. Under the consent agenda, are there any requests to remove any of the items from the consent agenda at this time? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose and support 8.2. It speaks to the province to amend Ontario Regulation 391/21, said that the producers are responsible for recyclables from all sources, not just residential.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Moved by second by Councillor Deal. All those in favor? And motion carries. Is there any other item that someone would like moved? Councillor Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's the last one. Is that the one that talks about,
That would be
provincial
the,
government getting the lead out and paying their share? Starts with L, I think, that community of,
Larder Lake.
I think so.
the last one on mine. Which one is it?
It's 8.9.
8.9.
8.9, okay. So you would like to support that, Councillor Fisher?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have a seconder for that letter of support? Councillor Chartrand? All those in favor? And motion carries. Are there any other items, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out that 8.12 on the Huron County Housing and Homeless Monthly Share. I would just provide some information there. That comes from my Affordable Housing and Homeless Committee at the county, so.
Okay.
I would just mention that 8.11 will have to be taken separately due to Councillor Morrison's conflict.
Okay. So we'll pull 8.11 out, so, did I have the mover in a second here?
For the overall consent?
Mhm.
Not yet, no.
Okay, so can I get a mover and a seconder for all items except for 8.11 at this point, Councillor Deal and Deputy Mayor? That the consent agenda items 8.1 to 10 and 8.12 to 15 be received for information and approved, except for the ones that have already been dealt with. All those in favor? And motion carries. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive item 8.11, the accounts payable? Councillor Deal and Councillor McGrath. Any questions on the accounts payable? All those in favor? And motion carries. Under public meetings, hearings, and delegations, the first one is the presentation of the Emergency Management Group Read the Fire Community Risk Assessment. This is not a small document.
Good evening, your worship and members of council. On behalf of the Emergency Management Group, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity of completing a community risk assessment. It takes quite a bit of research in completing. They are mandatory, which I'll get into further in this discussion. With me tonight, my name is Rick Mountain, by the way, and with me tonight is Mr. Lyle Kwan, who you met previously at another council meeting. So if we go to the next slide, please. So why do you have a community risk assessment? Well, the fire marshal's office made it mandatory that every municipality in the province of Ontario had to complete one by July 1st of 2024. They have to be completed every 5 years, a new one, and municipalities expected to review it each year, and that would be the responsibility of the fire department to review it. Now the next slide, please. Now, OFM regulation really looks at the 3 lines of defense as the fire marshal's office refers to. The first one being public education. Second line of defense being fire code enforcement and inspections. Third line of defense is your emergency response, so your firefighters responding. And then we believe in emergency management group, there's a 4th line of defense, and that's your emergency management program within your community. Now, why are they focusing on this? I'm of the opinion that the fire marshal's office is focusing their resources on preventing fires from occurring to begin with. And the reason for that is a lot of municipalities in the province of Ontario are having great difficulty staffing their apparatus during the daytime, Monday to Friday. There's a real shortage of volunteer firefighters in the province of Ontario, in fact, across Canada. And it's not just Ontario. daytime availability is really waning, and they're having a hard time getting firefighters to respond, and what they're having to do is rely on their neighbors more often than they'd like to, and then the neighbors are sort of saying, well, you've got problems with your own staffing, here we are sending our equipment over to supplement you, so it becomes a bit of a vicious circle. So the fire marshal's office, I believe, is taking the stance that, okay, we have this problem, so how do we look after this problem? And I believe that's through public education. Let's prevent fires from occurring to begin with. And how do we prevent them? Public education and fire code enforcement and inspections, the first two lines of defense. Next slide, please. So whenever we look at a CRA, there's 9 profiles that are mandatory that we have to complete. I'm not gonna read through them, but you can see that there's different sections that we look at the municipality. We literally look at every building stock, your demographics, your hazards, your critical infrastructure, building stock, your geographic profile, what's your makeup of your community, and then what's the past history of fires in your community as well, and the economy. Agriculture is big in this area, and that's a real driver for your economy in this area. So how do we prevent fires from occurring in the agricultural sector? Next slide, please. Well, first off, let's talk about risk. Risk is the probability and possibility of an event occurring, and they'll have an adverse effect on the community in health, property, and organization, environmental, or community. So now that we've identified the risk, we want to look at the probability and the consequences if that risk does come to light, such as a fire. How is it going to affect the community? And then how do we prevent that risk from occurring? And that's coming up with a mitigation strategy. And I'll talk through the number of risks that we identified through the development of the community risk assessment. Next slide, please. So once we've identified the top risks, we come up with a plan as to what you're going to do to mitigate it. So you have 4 choices. You can avoid the risk through implementation of programs and initiatives, prevent fires from occurring to begin with. You mitigate it through programs and initiatives to reduce the probability and consequences. You accept the risk where there's no specific programs or initiatives have to be implemented. Or you transfer the risk, and that's where the fire department would ask for outside resources to come and help mitigate the risk. And in most cases, and you're no different, is technical rescue disciplines. Some of the technical rescues are very complicated. There's standards that have to be followed. Training is very expensive to maintain for the firefighters to keep their skill sets up to the number of times they're going to be called upon. Quite often, it's more fiscally responsible for a municipality to look at an outside resource, such as another fire department that does provide that service, and then entering a response agreement. And I'll speak to that further. Next slide, please. So we'll talk about some of the risk summary that we identified. Some of them have to do with new residential developments in established areas. When you have new developments, call volume of the fire department, the demands on the fire department is going to increase. Be it call volume, but also the request for inspections and public education. There's a change in the demographics. You may have an older demographic in the area, or you may have more visible minorities moving into the area, and you have to adjust your programs to accommodate that demographic. The increased demand on public education, so fire departments are now looking at implementing door-to-door smoke alarm programs where they go door to door and do a check to make sure that they're in place, answer questions of the residents that may have to do with fire prevention and the operation of their smoke alarm. And a new concern now is lightweight construction. As of July 1st, 2022, the fire marshal's office, in cooperation with the Ontario building code changes, it's mandatory that the building department notify the fire department if all new construction that incorporates lightweight construction is your prefab roof trusses, metal studs in the walls, and your I-beam floor joists that are made out of pressurized wood. Those are all considered lightweight construction, and it's mandatory that the building department must notify the fire department of all new construction that have these components in it, with the exception of houses. The fire marshal's office is saying that the fire department should assume every house has some form of lightweight construction in it, no matter its age. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but older homes have what's called balloon construction. And that's where there was no studs in the walls, the fire got into the walls, or right to the roof and took the roof off. And we used to have a saying in the fire department, whoever got to the attic first won. And quite often it was the fire that got to the attic first and it just destroyed the house because it gets in the walls and there's no fire stops in the walls. So that's another risk with some of the older construction. And what happens is then the integrity of the building is compromised and you get early collapse, the same as the lightweight construction. Rule of thumb used to be 15 minutes to 20 minutes of free burning in an area with lightweight construction, expect to collapse in very soon. So the incident commander has to be very cognizant of that before he sends any firefighters inside to fight a fire. It's better off and safer to do an external fire attack. Then the other thing that fire departments have not been promoting an awful lot is residential sprinklers. There has not been a fatality in Canada in a residence that's had a fire that has residential sprinklers. And everybody wonders, okay, you put sprinklers in your home, all of them go off and all the water damage through it. It's only the sprinklers that are activated because of the heat of the fire they've activated. So it's in an isolated area, but it allows the residents the opportunity to escape safely. It may have some smoke inhalation or something like that, but at least they're alive and they're able to get outside. So it does give the residents that opportunity to escape. Whereas without residential sprinklers, chances are you may not have that opportunity to get out in time. Weather event is another risk that we identified. Your area's had a history of severe windstorms, tornadoes, warnings throughout the area. That's quite often happens. Climate change is really affecting the environment. There's more instances of flooding taking place. You probably noticed the intensity of the rainstorms now. You're getting large quantities of water coming down all at once, such as happened this past summer where Toronto got 4 inches of water in a matter of a couple hours. Massive flooding, that's a risk because if somebody gets in trouble in that flood water, you need specialized rescue techniques to rescue them. And then we're finding too that municipalities are starting to install storm sirens, similar to your tornado sirens you see in the United States. And what some are doing is they're converting the siren on their fire station, if they still have one, into a storm siren. So at least there is some form of early notification for the community. While some others are also looking at a public notification system, such as the Alertable app, if you're familiar with that, that's on your cell phone. Some municipalities have gained access to that and they're able to put out public notifications such as road closures, water main breakages, water main servicing, that sort of thing. I know of one municipality that puts out those notices right on Alertable. It goes to all the phones that are in their municipality. Only it doesn't go province-wide or anything like that, but it's another option for municipalities to give early warning to their residents as to weather event coming. Next page, please. I spoke earlier about technical rescue. There's many technical rescues that municipalities have got to be concerned about. There's trench from construction, they collect trench collapses in, trapping people in the trench. Rope rescue, be it high angle or low angle. Confined space, and especially in your area where you have the silos and grain bins. Those are high risk of having a confined space rescue, and what that is the grain inside collapses down and traps the individual inside. And that is a special technique. And if you get involved in confined space rescue, technically you need a high angle rescue team with them, according to the NFPA standards. The other rescues are elevator machinery rescues, such as farm implement and entrapment. And ice and surface water are quite common too, but water rescue is now broken down into surface water, such as a creek that is not flowing fast. But if a creek flows greater than 1 knot, it's considered a swift water rescue. And if you've got flooding, that's considered a floodwater rescue. And if you have a boat situation involved, which you probably wouldn't have, but then it becomes a watercraft rescue. So there's many different disciplines that have to be certified, firefighters have to be certified to be participate in that rescue. So this is getting back to my previous point about it being very costly for a fire department to look after all these disciplines. And for the number of times to be called upon, it'd be very cost prohibitive to try and look after all those, so possibly the fire department could look at doing a joint venture with a neighboring fire department, and the one I would think you should focus on is confined space and high angle, because they go on hand in hand when it comes to silo rescues and grain bin rescues. Or, as I said earlier, municipalities should look at developing response agreements for every technical rescue and hazmat situation with neighboring municipalities. And some say, well, you can call in mutual aid, but the problem with mutual aid is it's supposed to be reciprocal, not to mention the responding fire department quite often will recover their costs. So if you have a response agreement in place ahead of time, this is all covered, and you may be required to pay what's known as a standby fee for them to be willing to come and look after, mitigate the rescue in your municipality. But then they also want full cost recovery, and especially if they're a career fire department and they have to pay the salaries for all the firefighters that responded. And if they have to do backfill to make sure they have enough protection in their municipality, it can get quite costly. I know of one technical rescue that the final bill was up around $34,000. And some municipalities have got it in their fees and charges bylaw where they can charge it back to those involved or created the rescue to begin with, but in that situation, the municipality did not charge it back to the resident just because of the high cost. So that's quite an exposure to the municipality, but my point again is preparation, and that's part of the risk assessment. We've identified the risk, now it's time to make preparation to mitigate that risk. And I'm suggesting response agreements would be the best way to get this municipality after that. Next slide, please. I want to touch on domestic terrorism. This is a common risk across Canada. In fact, around the world, and you know the world events that are going on right now, anti-Semitism and anti-religious outbreaks and that sort of thing, but not necessarily is that going to happen in Huron East. But domestic terrorism also is considered aggression towards municipal staff. You may have some taxpayers that come into the office and not very happy with something that the municipality has done, then they become quite aggressive towards municipal staff. We have history of some municipal staff having drinks thrown at them, threats of violence. So municipality needs to have a mitigation strategy prepared for each one of its municipal buildings. Not necessarily for bombing or anything like that, but consider what would you do if you had an active shooter come in? Where would the staff go? A lot of municipalities do not have a plan in place, nor do they have a designated safe room. And the safe room is one that's got walls that are able to sustain the munitions being shot at it. So munitions do not penetrate through the walls. So we're talking concrete in most cases, or cinder block of some sort, or a room that they can't access in another area of the building. But we're finding that municipalities do not have a plan in place at all when it comes to domestic terrorism. And like I said, it does not have to be a bombing or any of that sort. It could be an active shooter, or it could be just a client that comes in that's very aggressive towards staff. Some municipalities have left the plexiglass up in place wherever your staff is making contact with the public. That was in place during the pandemic. They have left that up, not necessarily for protection from COVID virus, but for protection from violent clients that come in and threaten to throw drinks and whatnot at the staff or lash out at them with violence. So discussing now fire prevention's focus from the fire marshal's 2 lines of defense. Huron East Fire Department is going to have to start looking at more proactive public education programs. And that's talking to seniors, going to the schools, attending fairs, festivals, that sort of thing, and promoting smoke alarm programs, carbon monoxide programs, residential sprinklers. But they're also going to need to develop a robust fire inspection program that meets or comes close to meeting the frequency of inspections under the fire underwriter survey. And the fire underwriter survey set your insurance rates. And they do that based on your fire protection of your municipality, and they also look at water services and that sort of thing. And they set the insurance rates for your municipality, but they also set the number of times or the frequency that certain building types such as industry, mercantile, professional offices, assembly buildings, care and treatment, they dictate how often they should be inspected. That should be part of the robust fire prevention program that is developed and possibly council included in the establishing and regulating bylaw for the fire department, that the number of times or whatever frequency you're going to decide upon. And some municipalities have taken the initial initiative to set up their own frequency program themselves, for which the fire department tries to achieve. It is very difficult for fire departments to meet the FUS requirements, just because of the frequency and the number of building stock and the lack of resources within the fire department to do all those inspections. So they've established a schedule which they can hopefully achieve. That's realistic as well. Currently, your inspections are based on request and complaint only. It is not a proactive program. And there's also some that are mandatory as set forth by the Fire Marshal's Office of Ontario. And also need, as I mentioned, need to set goals and proposed outcomes wished upon being achieved upon completion of these inspections. Next one, please. Rolling stock, there's, as I spoke to you about the inspections, it takes time to inspect them. If you've got a large complex or industrial building, it usually takes a good full day or half a day, or if not longer, to do a proper inspection and then write up all the information afterwards. Second suites, such as basement apartments and short-term accommodations, are becoming problematic across the province, and a lot of municipalities are developing bylaws to govern them. And what they're asking for is that they be registered, and part of the registry is they pay for a license. And part of that license includes that they have to have a mandatory fire inspection each year, because they're considered a commercial enterprise. And there's regulations that they have to follow, such as having a fire safety plan, fire extinguishers in place, smoke alarms in place, CO alarms in place. So that has to be inspected and make sure they're in place, not to mention that the building meets the Ontario Fire Code and the Ontario Building Code when it was first built. And as I mentioned earlier, the lightweight construction has to be reported now and documented, and the fire department has to be made aware of it. And with the building stock, again, I spoke earlier about the number of fires, you want to reduce them because of the lack of availability of firefighters. And then the last part of this, I looked at was the fire stations. Some may need renovations or replacement depending on their age and condition. And that's another risk to municipality fiscally, not necessarily operationally, but the fiscally. So next slide, please. So where do we go from here? This is where the fire master plan is developed based on community risk assessment. Community risk assessment helps direct or develop the direction the fire master plan should go. And part of this contract was the completion of a fire master plan, and as you know, that was suspended for the time being and will be completed at a future date and time. That is considered your community risk reduction plan. And what the fire master plan does is help reduce the risk and comes up with a mitigation strategy for those risks in the community. Part of the plan will also have to look at your high-risk residents, such as the vulnerable occupancies, structures with multiple occupancies, and those with mobility and incapacities, physical injuries that are giving them trouble in being mobile in the home. Those people need focus on evacuation plans, aid, and how to get out in an emergency. You're presently getting a fire chief and a deputy chief. You're in the recruitment process right now, so that mitigation risk will be reduced significantly shortly. And being prepared for potential hazards, just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it won't happen. Like I said earlier, domestic terrorism doesn't happen a lot, but you should be prepared for the event if it does happen. Last slide, please. So in conclusion, I want to thank the members of the Huron East Fire Department. They're great assistance to us in the development of this community risk assessment. EMG would also like to thank you again for the opportunity of completing your risk assessment for you. And I'm available for any questions you may have at this time.
Counselor Chartrand.
Yeah, I'm curious, you just said that, the master risk assessment plan was suspended or put on hold.
Fire master plan was, yes, because of,
Wasn't that part of the contract?
yes, it is, it will be completed at a later date. But right now,
I guess
you're
I
going
could
through
ask.
the chief, you're going through the fire chief, there's been a number of improvements that has occurred in the fire department, such as new SCBA and looking at new apparatus or replacement apparatus. That's the sort of thing we wouldn't look at. Write in information into the plan that you're already looking after. So you're reducing that risk, and therefore we don't have to look at it as strongly as we did in the past. So there's a process that you have a committee working on. And once that everything is in place and the new chief and deputy are in place, that would be the time that we come back and complete the fire master.
And my last question, you talked about lightweight,
Building construction.
building construction. You didn't touch at all, and maybe it is in the plan, homes that have, solar panels on them, wind turbines, that type of stuff,
That is addressed in the community risk assessment. I did not touch on everything because the community risk assessment under the Emergency Management Protection, Civil Protection Act, portions of the community risk assessment can be remain confidential. That being your hazard identification and risk assessment list and your critical infrastructure list. And because those are considered, can be considered confidential information, and you don't want people in the public to be aware of what is critical infrastructure in case they have a beef with the municipality and decide to sabotage something. We don't want to publicize what some of the risks are in the community, if somebody does cause harm to that infrastructure. So that's why I didn't touch on everything. This is a very high level discussion tonight. But it is included in the community risk assessment. I did speak on wind turbines and I did speak to solar panels. In fact, one of the things I'm suggesting now with solar panels is that a sign be attached to the 911 sign at the roadway identifying it's reflective, but it identifies the solar panels are at that residence. So when the firefighters pull in, they'll see a yellow sign that's warning them solar panels are there. So then they'll be cognizant, okay, where are they? Are they on the roof? Or are they on the ground? If they're on the roof, they know that there's extra weight out there. So if there is a fire on the roof, it's gonna collapse sooner. So that is touched on in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Sir. But thank you for bringing that up.
Counselor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your report was pretty intensive. I only fell asleep twice listening to it, sir. It's a pretty good day. Who paid for this puppy? The province mandated it, so are they paying for it?
No, the municipalities are. And that's, they've downloaded that on the municipalities, and that's why they've made it mandatory of each municipality having completed one. Whether you have a fire department or not, every municipality had to complete it.
I think a while ago, every municipality was forced to have a fire department, weren't they?
No,
Oh, really?
you know, but the council to decide if they want to have a fire department, it's not mandatory.
I misunderstood that. Okay.
Under the Fire Protection, Prevention and Protection Act, fire department is technically an option. But a lot of municipalities that don't have a fire department such as Morris Turnberry, your neighbors, they rely on their neighbors to provide fire protection for them.
Well, yeah, they had to have some source of.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's.
Now, there
that's what
are
I'm
some
saying.
unorganized municipalities and communities in northern Ontario have absolutely no fire protection at all. Because they're that remote.
Yeah.
And in that case, if they're an organized municipality, they have to have a fire safety officer, which is really a fire prevention officer that promotes public education and preventing fires from occurring to begin with, but also proactively doing fire inspections in that community.
Thank you, sir.
No problem, sir.
Any other questions of council, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You spoke of sprinklers in residential houses. Are there other provinces in Canada that do have?
There's none that have them mandatory that I'm aware of, but some municipalities have mandated them in the subdivision agreement. Because could have poor access into it, could be in a very remote location within the municipality, or there's other reasons. And some municipalities have mandated them as part of the development agreement. And that's how they get around it, but they are not mandatory, they're optional, but this is where fire prevention could work collaboratively with your developers in promoting it to the home buyers, that this is a great option. They're really, when you think about the cost, it's really cheap insurance and a lifesaver. For $1 million home, you're probably looking at $20,000 to $35,000 extra to install. That's pretty cheap insurance when you think about it. We had one client that had residents that had a log home. Their insurance was $25,000 a year. They installed cisterns, and what that is, a big underground tank, as you know, it just has water supply. Their insurance rate dropped by $20,000 a year by just there installing a cistern, by having a water supply close by. Another option is if a farm has a pond close by, if they were to install a dry hydrant, then the fire department could hook to that and draw water from the pond, and that'll help reduce their fire insurance, but also gives the fire department quick access to water supply.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a thought on that line, so, a good friend of mine in Eastern Ontario, they recently built a, new church. And the fire marshal in that community forced them to have a 10,000 gallon cistern.
Mhm.
Could that happen here?
Yes.
Don't let that out. Okay, no, I just wondered.
Again, that's part of the building permit and the requirement for the fire protection and that sort of thing. If the water is not readily accessible, it could be a requirement out of the agreement.
So extending that a bit, then with our large agricultural area and the number of huge pork barns and
Yes.
storage sheds, et cetera, that are being built. Is that something we should be looking at as a community?
Yes. My personal opinion, yes, it should be promoted at that time and the benefits of it. Having cisterns there or dry hydrants. The water supply on scene is a great aid to the fire department, but it also reduces the insurance costs, not to mention it reduces the fire damage and the loss of stock that could be trapped in the building.
Are they, same thing then for sprinklers? Or not? Is that something?
Again, it's part of the agreement and under the different circumstances that may present themselves under the application of whatever the occupancy is.
Thank you, sir.
Like there's some occupancies, sorry to interrupt,
Yeah,
there's
no.
some occupancies that sprinklers are mandated, such as care and treatments. of
Yeah,
nursing
yeah,
homes,
I'm
that's-
aware of that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking
Some assemblies.
agricultural instances. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of council at this time? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next on the list, we have the Huron Community Family Health Team request for a rent decrease. Welcome.
Hello, good evening. Mayor McClellan and councilors, thank you for allowing us to present to you this evening. My name is Kelly Buchanan and I am the Executive Director of the Huron Community Family Health Team here in Seaport. Tonight, I'm representing not only the Family Health Team, but also the physicians associated with the Seaforth and Area Family Health Organization, which work within our Family Health Team. And we all work at the 32 Centennial Drive building at the Huron. It's Huron East Medical Center, I think is what you guys call that building. With me tonight is Dr. Megan Nolan representing the phone, our board chair, Monique Van, and the board treasurer, Tony Van Den Hegel. Today. So hopefully you had an opportunity to have a look over our request and understand the impact of those yearly rental increases and how they're affecting our budget. When I started here in 2013, the rent at that building was $15.60 a square foot. So it's now over $20 per square foot, and that exceeds our yearly rent funding by over $6,000 at this point. And as we all know and can appreciate, everything is more expensive, but unfortunately, the Ministry of Health doesn't look at it that way. We have not had an increase in our rental costs for over 10 years. So what you may not be aware of is for the family health team world, unlike hospitals, we don't have the luxury of going into a deficit at the end of the fiscal year If we spend over, we have to cover those costs, or they are recouped from our following year's budget. So in the real world that we all live in, the cost of medical supplies, IT support, the constant threat of cyber attacks is all new and constantly increasing expenses that is making us balance our ability to balance our budget virtually impossible. Not to mention that primary care is the low end of the stick when it comes to funding for human resources, and that creates constant pressure of us trying to keep our compensation competitive in order to recruit and to retain staff. So therefore, our ask is to respectfully request that the rent be decreased, or at least be considered to be decreased. Now, hopefully in the range of our local comparable rural fits, which I included in the information package I sent out earlier. That would allow us to first and foremost stay within our allowed budget, increase staff compensation, create an enhanced programming for our community, and continue to provide quality local primary care that our patients deserve. It is not lost on us how fortunate we are to have the premises that we currently have and the support of the municipality. For that, we are very grateful. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you tonight and bring this to your attention, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I know you invited me to give you a call, but I wanted this certainly to be a discussion of all of council, and there wasn't anything between you and I that we could arrange on this one. I did take the time to talk to staff because I need a little bit of refresher of how we got to where we are. And I do appreciate the fact that you're bringing this to have a discussion, open discussion. The one thing that I'm curious about is you did have figures from other areas of what they were getting charged. Certainly, I do believe our facility is certainly of the newer ones, of all of those that were being compared. Also, do you know what is all included in their rent? Because if I understand correctly, when we made the original arrangement with the doctors, it's not just the rent per square foot that we're including in the cost of rent per square foot. Because the doctors made it pretty clear to us, they wanted to be doctors, they did not want to be administrators or anything else. So I do believe we pay for some of the employees that are there. We do pay for the cleaning of the facility over and above. So there's a number of other things that are actually rolled into what we do. Were those other options also included with all those other facilities that you got comparisons from?
In some, yes, and in some not. So some that are, especially ones that are hospital-based, they are included, and that are associated with their hospital. In ours, you provide the cleaning staff that do the nightly cleaning of the building. But that's the only staff that you pay for, or that the municipality pays for.
Okay, and I may be corrected here, but I thought we also had paid for some administration responsibilities. And I could be wrong, but I thought that was part of the original agreement that was put together.
I don't know what that would be.
Okay,
Or who that would be.
but in fairness then, that's probably a really good justification for me to ask that council at least pass a motion asking staff to come back with a report with all the information so that we're right up to speed on whatever the deal is, how it does compare, and then we can have a proper discussion to see if something in fact should be adjusted here. If that's appropriate, would somebody like to make the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Chartrand, second by Councillor Deal. Any other questions on the motion itself? All those in favor? Okay, go ahead, Larry.
How hard do you lobby the government for this? I'm not gonna say you like we haven't, but.
Yeah, yes, we have. And it's, yeah, it's like, beating a proverbial dead horse, as it would appear. They keep promising that there's money coming, but we're all the family health teams are struggling with the same issues. And unfortunately, the funding coming, we had a small amount of increase in the last 2 years, but it's money that we needed for all the requirements regarding cybersecurity and all of those pieces as well. So that's just.
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is, have you gone through like Lisa Thompson?
Yeah, we met with her about 6 months ago.
Okay.
She, and also because Huron and Perth, we also met with the Stratford I forget that gentleman's name, but he also came to the meeting. So all the family health teams, we met with them. Told them what issues that we're facing, and the reality is that eventually, we're gonna have to cut services and staff. That's gonna be our only option to meet our budget requirement and all the other requirements that we have to do. So, you know, we aren't, you know, having Sundays, you know, on.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I just wonder if as council, we should be lobbying them as well.
Just to share, I did at the Roma Convention. I had we had a delegation with Counselor Smith or with Minister Smith.
Yeah,
I'm the chair of the HPPH, so I did express to her because they've given us a 1% increase each year over the next 3 years, and as you can imagine, wages themselves eat up a lot more than that. So we had a very good presentation. She stopped me in the middle of it, asked a bunch of questions, so she was really paying attention to what was going on. But at the end of the day, we told her, guess what? We let 13 and a half full-time employees go because we can't meet our budget based on what they're actually supplying to us. And that's exactly what Kelly's talking about, is that may be one of their options, but we actually did that with HPPH this year.
And we
So-
are in the same boat.
Yeah.
We're down, we increased the physician overhead, we've decreased staff by a couple, I just did refill positions that left. It's making things tight for sure. Retaining staff is hard. They can go next door to the hospital and make a lot more money than what they make in primary care. It's not a nice of place, it's not a nice of team, it's not it's nice of a boss, but you know, money talks, so it's hard.
Yeah, like Mr. Smith was shocked that we had taken that step. And maybe it's a good thing, but it's to the point that Dr. Clausen has now been included on a board to represent health centers across the province. It's a very small group, but she's been included now. And I think it's because of the action that we took. They want her input into how we're gonna deal with these situations.
That's awesome. I mean, they told us, like, so AFTO is the Association of Family Health Teams of Ontario, and they act on our behalf as our, you know, they lobby for us with the government, that is our body. And, so it sounded like we were gonna get some money at the beginning of this fiscal, so that's why we were holding off on this to see. And, they keep saying they're working on it, but we haven't got it yet, so. You know, our ask was just if we, at the very least, if we can get it back into budget, that'd be awesome. If there was room for additional clearance, that just gives us a little buffer. We are one bad legal issue away from being in big trouble, so. As
Counselor
we know, the $5,000 legal budget that I have is probably good for 2 phone calls and a letter.
Counselor Chartrand.
Is there any possibility of grants that are out there available?
We, because we are funded by the government and not a charitable organization, most grants we're not eligible for.
Counselor Stepper.
Yeah, thank you. Your report there did mention that there's no longer such committee that you've been instructed to come to us. Just from your side, you've been around since 2013 in the role, did the committee structure work better, or is this structure working better for you?
Well, I only know, this is my first time here, so I don't know how it's gonna go yet, but the, certainly the committee structure was helpful. I felt that, you know, it was a smaller group, we could bring our concerns and our issues, they were kind of dealt with. Many things were dealt with on the spot, decisions were made, because that committee obviously had certain amounts of authority when it came to some things. Others did have to come to council or whatever, but I always felt that it was dealt with pretty swiftly. You know, it's a different now than it was, for sure. But that's is what it is.
Okay.
Personally, I like the smaller group approach. It just allows to sit down, chat with someone, explain something, walk them through something, show them something that's just a little different. Have to put it on words and then bring it to them. I guess I didn't know I could have made a 30-page PowerPoint. I would have done that.
You get more attention when you talk less and let us ask
I
questions.
thought I might.
Counselor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know I'm stating the obvious when I say healthcare is integral to Huron East and the happiness of the family health team is integral as well. I've been a client there since it started and I can't say enough good things about it. I'd hate to see something happen there that they had to reduce staff or drop services. So this report you were asking staff to bring forward, I would request they come to our next council meeting, please.
We can see if staff can accomplish that. We don't meet again for what, 2 weeks?
September 3rd is our next meeting, yeah, September 3rd.
So almost 3 weeks away. So hopefully that's very doable.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Councilor McGrath?
Just a comment, this is typical of our government that starts something, funds it, and then starts downloading individually, not giving the increases. Goes back to local taxpayer to fund. And it's a sad thing, and that's why I just sort of wish there was something more we could do to pound on the minister and say, look, cut the crap, you know what, I mean, you've had a raise in 10 years, I'm sure, and you know things can't change the same, so. But I guess if you got the committee going at it. Good luck.
You have a question? No? Okay. Any other questions at this time? Kelly, thank you very much for bringing this. We will get the information and we will get back to you.
Awesome, thank you.
Take care. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, we are down to planning. 10.1 part lot control exemption PLCO2 2024. Shay, welcome.
Thank you there. So I've got two part law control exemption files today, so I'll just briefly go over the first one here. So the first one applies to 1626 Linda Drive in Seagull. The owner is Full Quality Homes and it was Baker Flaming First. Next slide, please. So just a quick air photo of the subject property here. The property is designated residential and zoned R2 special, so it's a residential medium density. The subject property is the one spot that hasn't been built on in this air photo yet, so we're in the full quality subdivision just at the north end of Seaforth here. And a 6-unit row house is currently being built on that vacant spot towards the center of the subdivision there. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this application is the applicant is requesting the subject lands be exempt from part lot control under the Planning Act to allow for the creation of 6 conveyable building lots. Unit. It's a bit hard to see here, but this is the current state of the subject property here with the row houses being currently built. And next slide. So pretty straightforward. All of the lots have been individually serviced and meet all of the requirements of the zoning bylaw. So as a result, it's recommended that the request for exemption from part lot control be approved and the corresponding bylaw be passed. And if you have further questions on that.
Any questions in council? Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councilor Dalton, second by Councilor Chartrand. That the council of the municipality of Huron East consider the bylaw to provide exemption from part lot control for registered plan 22M-22, block 16 being parts 1 to 10, reference plan 22R-7394 in Seaforth municipality of Huron East, county of Huron. Now we got one question. How come we call it Seaforth? It's McKillop. It doesn't matter. It is McKillop. All those in favor? And motion carries. Part lot control exemption for number 3 of 2024.
Perfect. So this subject property is 757 and 759 Anderson Drive in Brussels. The owner and applicant is Peter Hebert. Just next slide, please. So the blue outline there is the subject property, so this is in the new subdivision in Brussels behind the arena there. This is one of the first builds being completed in that subdivision, designated residential zone, low density residential. And a semi-detached building has been built on the subject property here. Next slide, please. So again, the purpose of this application is to request exemption from part lot control under the Planning Act and to allow the creation of 2 conveyable lots, each with a dwelling unit. And again, pretty straightforward. This one, the hydro had to be rerouted as a result of discussions with Festival Hydro. So that's been since dealt with, and each unit is separately serviced. It meets all of the provisions of the zoning bylaw. And this application is also recommended for approval to be exempt from part lot control and the corresponding bylaw.
Any questions of council on this property? Councilor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for both properties, Shay, please, I noticed that they have 2 years to do this. And it's the first time I've heard anything like that on park lot control in all my time on council. Is there a reason? Are people being tardy and getting it done, or
Yeah, I
they
think,
need more time to get it done?
so we've been experiencing in the department is typically we, in the past had 6 months as our standard time frame. And that in most cases, that was enough time for the lawyer to deposit the deed and get everything registered, but there was a few cases where lawyers were requesting a little bit more time to have everything registered through the land registry office. So we decided that a longer time for the part lot control to be exempt would be more appropriate and is more in line with what other municipalities are doing.
Does that negatively affect the builder of the property?
No, it shouldn't at all. It just gives the lawyers a little bit more time to get all of their documents in line and everything ready.
Thank you.
Any other questions of council? Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councilor Fisher, second by Councilor Wilby, that the council of the municipality of Huron East consider the bylaw to provide exemption from part lot control for registered plan 596 part of block 34 being parts 1 and 2, reference plan 22R-7104 in Brussels, municipality of Huron East, county of Huron. All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Shay. Nothing under municipal drains, reports and recommendations of municipal officers, and I'll go to 12.1, the fire community risk assessment.
Yes, after our 30-page presentation, I don't know if you have any more questions, but certainly I'll do my best if any need to be answered, but I think the report speaks to itself. I just need a motion to proceed with the report.
Can I get a mover and a second, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Morrison. That the council of the municipality of Huron East receive the Huron East Community Risk Assessment as presented by Emergency Management Group. All those in favor? And motion carries. Huron East Fire Service Structural Review. I get a mover and a seconder for this, Councillor Deal and Councillor Chartrand, that the council of the municipality of Huron East accept and approve the new organizational structure for the Huron East Fire Service. Any questions before I take the vote? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Brad, I guess. Do we have more officers now or fewer?
It's actually, if I remember correctly, it works out about the same because we had 4 in one department, 2 in another, and we're gonna have 3 across the board or something like that.
But yes, I listened to that, Mr. Mayor, thank you, but those were lieutenants. Do we still have captains or do we have no more captains?
We only have 2 captains in Seaforth.
Yep.
But the rest of the stations all had 4 captains, so that's status quo essentially. So really what we're doing is asking to put 2 more captains in Seaforth. And then, once we kind of get things stabilized a bit, we'll look at bringing in the lieutenant position really more for a succession planning perspective to start grooming some of the firefighters into those officer roles. So they'll at times, particularly when we have calls when maybe we don't have enough people there, a lieutenant could theoretically take command of the scene. During a fire response. And so give them some opportunities to get a little bit more officer experience and command experience.
It just seemed top heavy to me. If we have a chief and a deputy chief, 4 captains and 4 lieutenants, we got 10 officers for 20 people.
We were gonna eliminate through attrition, once those positions, those people that are in them, the deputy positions would be eliminated. So you kind of eliminated one officer position, bringing in essentially another one. So I don't think we're making it top heavy, but you gotta remember, you got 4, what I'll call, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Patton, 4 platoons at each station that are basically capable of functioning at some point in time. And so you want to make sure you have enough staff within each of those platoons to be able to provide appropriate coverage, because you gotta remember, at every fire scene, you don't get the entire fire service from a certain station attending. There'll be, a handful of them that show up. Yeah. So you want to have enough people there.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the vote? All those in favor? And motion carries. Thank you. 12.3, service group funding.
I can speak, I'll speak a little bit this one just before, maybe just for the sake of those members of council. It had gone through the Recreation Advisory Committee. It was a report that we kind of had conversations at a meeting back in the spring. Subsequently, just at the beginning of summer, this report was brought to them. It really speaks to the more dynamic question, and then hopefully addresses the issue that some of the community groups have raised based upon sort of that fee structure change we implemented up at the Brussels Community Center. And this really just kind of opens it up, makes it more transparent, makes it equitable across the entire municipality, to allow basically those groups, if they're looking for some sort of, rather than getting a reduction in the fee, come and ask for whatever grant support that they need in an equivalent fashion, but it's a bit more open and transparent. So some of the options that we had conversations at the May 1st meeting was looking at setting a specific amount. The only risk there was, once we set a set amount, you're giving that same amount to whatever community group comes to the door, and there's no real accountability as to what the municipality or the taxpayer is getting as a benefit for that amount. We certainly had lots of conversation about the discounted rental rate. The disadvantage there is, it doesn't, it's really not transparent. So you and the taxpayers don't really necessarily, or staff really know how much dollars are being given to that particular group. And it also affects sort of the operational cost side of things. So we're not really being sort of full accounting process in terms of what our operational and our revenue costs are. There also was a conversation about giving a discounted rate if the user's actually set up and based upon conversations with their insurer. They really dissuade us from that. In fact, they're actually trying to push us a little bit further the other way in terms of managing risks, and certainly the alcohol policy part of things is probably their biggest concern. We talked about staging, so that might calm opposition, but would just prolong the process. And so based upon staff's recommendation and the committee's review and consideration, the recommendation was to establish a grant funding program. The actual the grant policy is established in the back there for council to consider. And I'll maybe stop there and see if there's any questions from council.
I had a couple, and maybe I'm kind of getting some of the information, this one and the next one kind of tied together, because to me, they kind of seem to flow into the same thing. I guess I was a little surprised, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but after we take care of the service groups, we were still going to have the full amount that we used to have in the grant program, even though we're not taking any money out of that grant program for the service groups. Is that correct?
It's a particular service group, so it was the Lions Club, and the nuance there that we sort of said is that they're actually providing a service to our community that if they didn't do it, theoretically the municipality would do and would be our cost anyway, right? In the operation of that pool. So that's kind of the nuance of the difference, and that's why the second report, and we can certainly, if council wants to speak, talk to that report a little bit before we make a vote on this one. I don't know if that's possible, but.
And I understand. I guess what surprised me was that meant that our actual grant program. Between that and how we were gonna handle the Lions Pool, technically meant there was somewhere between a 20% and 40% increase
You're
into.
looking at if you keep the life, if you fund the lines as we suggested, and you keep the grant amount that we currently have in there, you'll be looking at a $25,000 increase to the levy. In 2025.
Yeah, okay, that was a bit of a jump. The only other thing that, and I did appreciate the fact that, you gave an extension this year for them to fill out their forms to get them in. I also wonder if, for the very first year, if it would be helpful, because when you throw a new form, government form, and I don't care if it's from the province or the feds or anybody else, the first time you go to fill it out, it appears overwhelming, even though it may not be. Could staff help each of the groups that want to fill in a report? Just help them walk through it the first year. They keep their own copy and then use that as their template going forward, because I don't want to see someone not get their paperwork in just because of the fact that they were overwhelmed with the paperwork. That's all.
So I'm looking at staff and I'm seeing that there's probably no reason why we couldn't put in that correspondence to say that if you need some assistance to reach out to us directly.
Okay. Were there any other questions, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I looked through the policy as well, and I guess the one thing that, obviously the date in mind, people having to get their applications in for the upcoming year is a little bit of a concern, I think, for myself. And more so what I'd like to see done is if, and I know the final decision is left up to council, but maybe what we should be doing is asking this, running this by the service groups. How is it gonna affect them? Like do a dry run with them, get their comments back before we actually pass this. I'd like to hear what they have to say. I mean, we went through it with the fee schedule, whether kind of bouncing some of that stuff off them, just to get their comments back. I'd like to do the same thing with this here. I mean, I would support it and give it two readings, but I think it needs to go back to the service groups and get their input on it.
You kind of lost me a little bit. I understand about the fact that we want to have good communication with them because we're changing something. I understand that part of it. Are we asking them if they agree with how we want to handle things?
I'd like to see what they think of this policy. Because obviously it's gonna affect them. The policy is all about them, right?
Except if I understand correctly what staff are proposing, it's actually better for them because there's actually more funds available. And it used to be, didn't by the start of the year, they had to have the request in, where now, although we're moving it ahead, we're giving them a letter with an actual date now. And maybe I'm up left field here, but
Yeah, no,
I thought this was to try and actually make things better.
Oh, for sure, but I just don't wanna make that mistake. I'd like to see, I'd like to hear from them and see what they think of it.
Councillor Stefan?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of questions. So it says here that if they get it for 2 or for 3 consecutive years, they have to wait 2 years to reapply. So if you're one of our primary service groups and you get 3 years of, because you continuously run, I'm using C4, the Alliance Elimination Job, they get support for 3 years and then they can't apply for 2. Is that the intent?
I think if they were applying for this, I'd have to look at Stacy and their.
Yeah, I don't think that, I think the intent is to share the wealth a little farther beyond our current standard service groups. So to give everybody an opportunity to benefit from funds from the municipality. And so in doing so, we have to rotate it a little, and it can't be like a, guarantee every year, and it always has to be a purpose that enhances the municipality as a whole. So this is not just to get away for it to run your annual event. Like if you have an annual event that's specifically for Huron East that's very special and requires it, then certainly yes. But again, if we keep it at the $25,000, there is now more funds available and it can be split up however council decides. and shared on an annual basis. I also do think that date is a little flexible, because if we determine our budget is $25,000, that's the budget. So we can still do the presentation for the actual grants after, but you have to realize that your budget is set prior to the letters coming in or
Yeah,
applications coming in. That would be.
I just think we're running fewer and fewer service clubs every day in the small towns. And if we exclude every third year, we're gonna exclude for two. I don't know outside of the Lions and Optimists that we're gonna have any bigger amounts. I don't see the need to include that in there. We as council can decide with whatever, just like we do now.
Typically, grants were never intended to be part of an operating budget.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Stacy's talking about,
Yeah.
is when they put the same thing in every year, they're just expecting us to be part of their operating budget.
I would agree, except for the fact that I would disagree in the pretense that the whole reason we're here right now is because the fees have increased. And we're trying to find a happy balance to our service clubs for what they give back to our community. So, I never seen anywhere before that we had a limit of who could apply for what and how often. So I'm just wondering why we're including that now. I heard six.
I have heard it at other meetings, not necessarily this council, but I have heard it from other committees that they do the similar thing. And for that reason, that's not meant to be part of their operating budget.
And then the other thing on the same note is, I believe, the deputy mayor says, if we even extend it right now to September, but if we're already the 13th of August, if they had their meeting. Like a service club had their meeting on the 8th to 10th of August, they're not gonna meet, they're only gonna have to rush in a whole budget for next year. I would like to see it extended to at least October.
I thought it was the end of September, it said.
Right, so if they have their meeting, let's just say tomorrow night and they're not informed, they're not getting to it till the 14th of September, just saying if they meet once a month. So then all of a sudden they've got to make a decision for the full year's budget within 2 weeks. If we extend it to October, they have 6 weeks.
Okay, understand that. The next two is Councillor Fisher and then Deal in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with, Councilor McClellan about doing a straw survey maybe of some of the user groups. I'm thinking of the ag societies and the horticultural societies that, I think they need the funds maybe more so than some others. I'm not 100% on that. Yeah, I can't see it being the end of August when groups take the summer off and then they're gonna have to guess what's gonna happen for 5 months of the year. I would like to see it at least the end of September. I would agree more with Councillor Steffler that it go till the end of October. I don't think that would impact staff too much when there's only 10 or what would there be, 15 at the most that apply for grants. If I remember correctly, there's not a lot of them. And changing and dropping people off after 3 years, that's again, horticultural societies. They do a lot more for our communities than the 500 or 600 bucks they get from us. With their volunteer labor and all the flowers and plants and things they buy. We're probably in a deficit position with them, for example. Thank you.
Okay, just before I go to Councillor Deal, just to clarify, if you have an organization such as we are soon going to talk about the Lions Pool. And we've discussed this before, and as the CAO had pointed out, is that we're all aware of the fact that if they couldn't run it, we're probably not going to close the pool. We're going to do our best to keep the pool in operation. It would become municipal expense. If you want to become a partner in something, then do it that way. It's not part of a grant program. There's a difference between a grant, which is, as was pointed out, this is something that is being requested to do some sort of enhancement, improvement, or whatever. And you're not doing the same enhancement, improvement, or whatever year after year after year, or else you didn't get it done when you got the grant the first time around. When we as a municipality apply to the county for, and it's usually about $10,000, I think, a year that you can get. You have to come up with some sort of program that, first of all, hasn't been out there, but if in fact you're successful, it could be replicated someplace else. So it's something that the county will help you try and accomplish, as long as it's something that they could then share with other municipalities, so that it's a benefit for everybody. And that's the whole idea when you do a grant. If you're just gonna give $500 every year to a certain thing, you're not doing a grant, you're part of the operating. Set it up in your books that you're gonna do that then.
Yeah.
It's a different thing altogether.
That just becomes a donation.
Yeah.
And I think, and Brad mentioned in the report that, you know, we as a municipality, really, do we have the authority to make donations on behalf of the taxpayers?
Councillor Deal was next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It just reiterating what has been spoken about, like, concern with the ag societies, horticultural societies, but also we fund the Santa Claus parades every year, so are we going to end up with a case of we get 3 Santa Claus parades and then the next 2 years are because they can't afford to do it? But it doesn't get done. That's what I'm concerned with, that we're going to end up, you know, with these smaller groups and whatnot completely dissolving because they can't keep up with it.
But-
Again, I know it's.
But then maybe our grant program should only be $5,000. And we take other things that we say, these are part of our overall community fabric, and we want to be part of them, and this is how much money we're gonna put to them each year.
You're supposed to have.
Like that may be the better way to handle it. Councillor Sharkey.
When this whole thing started, it started because of the rate increase more so at the Brussels area, because they had the biggest impact. And that was the service group. The thought is, how could we get back to that service group there? That's how it started. So now this new program, so it sounds like it'll affect all the groups that in the years past came to ask for grants, like the Ag Society, like the Van Eyckman House, like the Santa Claus Parade. So that means you're gonna have to reach out to all those groups as well and lay this new program out to them. I'm assuming, where they used to just have to put in one application with their financials each year.
I know Brad had a question or a comment, so I'll let him answer that and go next.
Well, I'm hearing basically the biggest thing I feel council's maybe struggling is that 3-year, 2-year cycle. I think that's being a big issue. So I mean, we could amend the policy to remove that, and then it becomes strictly council's discretion as to whether or not they're gonna continue to fund it in the organization on an annual basis. But I think this kind of conversation stemmed from 2 conversations. One was the Brussels Community Center and the rates, but also a bit of a conversation about the Seaforth Lions pool, because every year their operating cost requests kept increasing. First it was, 8,000, then it was 10, then it was 15, and then it just kept climbing, and it was consuming up a large portion of your grant, as you called it, grant funding. And so we were trying to look for a different model. And so the premise originally was to say that those things, those groups that are actually providing a service for the municipality, right? That they maybe get direct budget funding. So let's talk about maybe the horticultural society, because they do some gardens for us and they put flowers in for us. So do we direct fund them through a budget process? And then if they're trying to do initiatives for whatever other reason, that becomes a grant process. That would be the agricultural society. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't, but maybe there's a similar circumstance there, or maybe strictly they're a grant funding stream that they would go through that process. But we could look at it that way and say, are there certain groups that should be direct funded as a budget process because they're providing a direct service? That's kind of what I'm hearing. You guys are sort of rolling around a little bit, if I understood it correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Well, it looks like, and Brad touched on it, CEO Brad touched on it a little bit, where there are probably some groups where that donation worked well. So it did, like the Horticultural Society, if they were doing something like that, like they're not after big money, but they do little things like that. A donation, in my mind, like,
But maybe,
why change that if that's working, you know?
maybe just change the wording though from the donation, is to say, you know, we provide, you know, you do gardens and make our communities look good.
For sure.
Therefore, we're gonna give you $500 a year as direct budget funding.
Right,
You know, line right in your budget and they know it's coming every year and.
yeah, just something like that. I think that works well, so it does. It's just, I guess what I was getting to was in the financial considerations on page 81. It says there a financial surplus or reserve held by any organization and not designated for a specific purpose may disqualify an organization for receiving a municipal grant. So in many cases, a lot of the service clubs couldn't apply.
Right.
Cause they always carry a balance or a reserve or money in the bank, you know, that they might have a plan for and might not. That money's sitting there for them to add to, so they can go out and do what they wanna do with that.
I think the term may though is the appropriate piece there, because what we don't want to end up doing is building a person surplus. Right, so if you're a community group organization and we're giving you $1,000 and you're taking that $1,000 and putting into your surplus fund. That's not really the intent and purpose of what we're trying to grant.
For sure.
So when they apply, they're gonna have to, does say basically, what is it that you're gonna do with the money that we're giving you, and clearly understand that, but if it's simply just being that they're maintaining their surplus or don't wanna use their surplus, or they don't have a plan for their surplus,
Right.
that's a different story.
Counselor Dalton.
I'm just wondering, thank you, how this would affect like ballparks. The plowmans, there's a lot of those people that's how they.
Again, I think go back to the ballparks would be something that, you know, we would direct fund, because they're providing that. You know, we provide some stabilized funding for their operation because they're again doing a service. Whereas the Plowman's Association, they would probably be the ones that would be looking for a grant, right? For maintaining their operation, their association, whatever projects they're trying to do in initiatives.
Okay, so based on the discussion that we've had here, and I think staff are well aware of some of the things that council's concerned about. And we did want to do an extension anyways. Is anybody willing to make a motion to ask staff to bring back a report, and whether it comes back in at the next meeting or the meeting after that, we'll only push out the time frame of when we're expecting the groups to actually have their requests in. But just a recommendation based on the discussion of, you know, which ones maybe could fall under just straight part of the budget process, how much money could be in the grant program then, and the possibility of just a later time frame if possible in subsequent years going on, if in fact that doesn't really goof up our budget process. And I agree, I'm not sure why, if it's just a set amount in the budget process for grants, then staff are already aware of that. It's up to us just whether we give it away or not. Is anybody willing to make a motion on that at this point? No. Counselor Deal. Seconder, Counselor Morrison. Any questions about sending that back to staff to try and come back with kind of a roundabout fix for the discussion we've had?
Can you shorten that motion up just?
I'm kind of leaving it to staff to understand all the discussion that we had here and see what we can put into it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Is there any way that either staff can also communicate with some of the service clubs?
Oh, yes, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Can we have that in either in that motion, or can we make sure it's done? Because I'm not gonna vote in favor of this thing unless service clubs are going to be able to have a chance to look at it, or at least give us their comments on it too. It's up to council to make the final decision, so it is.
Counselor Morrison?
That can be in the motion, if we could, so that there is some consultation with the community groups. That it's just very clear that there is some communication on whether it's getting feedback or worded however, but I'd like that in the motion. And
Okay, I do have one caveat. We were asking for a change in the information to come from staff. Should we see the change and then see if we think it's a good idea at that point, and then ask staff to then ask the service groups? my only concern is if we ask the service groups now and then council wants changes, are we going back to the service groups again after the fact?
I would only say, and it'd be a question of, so if we don't see it till at least the first meeting in September, and if we want to make a change, I would only say, is there a budgetary thing? Are we gonna start pushing it? You know, it's November by the time we're making a decision.
It is a concern. So with the, you know, we are sort of set these timeframes to kind of work within our budget framework. But at the end of the day, I guess if you're going to, from a budgetary standpoint, we need to make the decision on those ones that we're gonna do direct budget funding. Right, because they all have a direct impact on the budget. If the grant amount's gonna be 25,000, theory, as long as you guys don't decrease or go over that, as long as we do that in time for those community groups to be able to figure out their budget for their subsequent year. That's the critical piece. Like, we don't want to be holding them up either. If they want to know what their funding is, we want to address that sooner rather than later, so they can plan their sort of 2025 year. Unlike what we've been doing in the past where we, you know, budget's been approved in April and then we're finally saying, okay, here's some money. They're already 3/4 of the way, or at least a quarter of the way through their year, right? This, doing it sooner, I think is you're making it sound like it's difficult for them, but I think it would be advantageous for them to know that they've got secured funding for the subsequent year sooner than funding it out halfway through the fiscal year. So if I could speak to your comment, I don't think I'm overly concerned. I think let's post what we've got. Let's hear the feedback. We've heard council's feedback, we've heard, and we can hear back from the community, and what we'll do is we'll bring back what we believe is, you know, a modified version of the collective whole and bring it forward. And I think it'd be a great opportunity for me to be able to sit down with staff too and review where we think those groups that should get direct funding based upon historical funding.
Councillor Steffler was next.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a great opportunity for us as a municipality to go back to the service clubs and let them have some input now before we, on the surface impact, like it looks like we're dictating again. I think we went back before and said, okay, we're gonna be, you know, include you. So if we do it ourselves and go back to them, and then I think it's very important that we include them now with the how it's gonna affect them, because we may not know, there may be something we miss. And then truly, we've already had our discussion here tonight. We'll be ready to pass that, and you know, they'll have a bit of a heads up of what's going on. They can sell it to their members, we work together, the transparency is there for both sides.
Councillor Chartrand.
One of the reasons why it's important for the community groups to know ahead of time too, is that they need to know that this is just not a donation, like you need to explain why you're using that money and what for, so that, you know, so if they're planning their budget and they know that ahead of time, then they can come back to us with a purpose of why they want that money, not just a handout, right?
Councillor Deal.
Just along the same lines, just give them a heads up on what we're looking at, and they can retroactively, like, they can get their budgets and stuff prepared and ready to roll. Then maybe it'll just give them an extra little bit of time, and they'll be ready to go when we say, okay, you gotta have it in by the end of October. They'll be, you know, put the bug in their ear, and they'll have stuff going, maybe, hopefully.
Just final comment, and I mean, if you're gonna use August, end of August as a deadline, that's really not real great for service clubs, because as I think Councillor Chartrand said, they usually take the summer off, their first meetings are in September. So.
So, the motion that's moved and seconded at this point is council or staff are gonna take into consideration the concerns council has had tonight. They're also going to share what the original intent was with the service groups, get their feedback, and then come back to council with a potential division of where we actually put everything, whether it's donations, whether it's grants, whether it's just direct funding to what we'll consider a partner in the municipality or whatever, and we'll see how it goes from there. All those in favor? And motion carries.
Yeah, next report, just to be a little bit separate and distinct here, so let's set aside the grant process now. The Seaforth Lions Club obviously has been operating on a bit more of the dominance of the grant program. Lots of conversations have been had in the past about should we be actually helping fund a direct fund to the Seaforth Lions operations because they provide the service directly to the municipality. So I think the report kind of speaks to itself in the sense of, you know, how we've analyzed and what those dollars are. It kind of admits the philosophy that we have with respect to capital expenditures as well, making it clear that, you know, at some point in time, we have to have a cost share on those capital requirements at 50 cents on the dollar. And so working with both the municipality as well as the Seaforth Lions and learn to look at capital planning. So what is their capital plan coming forward and make sure that we have enough dollars in our capital plan to accommodate the requests as opposed to being, you know, caught off guard by a last minute request for certain dollars. So I'll just leave it at that. And if there's any questions on that report, I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from council? Okay. I need a mover and a seconder then, please. Moved by Councillor Chartrand, second by Councillor Stefler. Whereas the municipality of Huron East recognizes the contribution that the Seaforth Lions Club provides in the operation of the Seaforth Pool. And whereas the municipality wishes to ensure that it is open and transparent with taxpayer dollars, that the council of the municipality of Huron East supports the recommendation from the Recreation Advisory Committee to establish a direct budgeted funding arrangement to support the Seaforth Lions Club Pool operation. And that staff incorporate an operation budget line in the 2025 and future operational budget specific for the Seaforth Lions Club Pool operations for council's consideration and approval as part of the 2025 budget discussion. And further, that the Seaforth Lions Club enter into an operational agreement for the Seaforth Lions Club Pool. Any final comments or questions? All those in favor? And motion carries. 12.5, citizen appointments to the Huron East Seaforth Community Development Trust. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Wilby, second by Deputy Mayor, that the council of the municipality of Huron East approve the citizen appointment of Neil Tam to the Huron East Seaforth Community Development Trust for a term ending in 2026. All those in favor? And motion carries. Amendment to Schedule B of bylaw 38 of 2004. I don't remember reading this one. 12.6, can I get a mover and a seconder?
Excuse me. Mr.
Go ahead.
Mayor, please. Go back to the last.
Yep.
Motion to Councillor Chartrand or Councillor Stefler. Wasn't, Mr. Price on for 8 years, not 4?
I don't know what.
I can answer that. It's Seaforth Trust, or both trusts have it where it's 2 4-year terms. So at the middle, before they go to their next 4-year term, they do have the opportunity to be advised if they wish to continue on that second 4-year term. So this is the remainder of,
Misunderstanding on my part then, thank you.
yeah.
Could I get a mover and a seconder for 12.6, please? Councillor Wilby and Councillor Newell. He's born. That the council of the municipality of Huron East approve an amendment to Schedule B of bylaw 38 of 2024, being a bylaw to establish the tax rate as described in report FIN-24-09. Comments or questions? All those in favor? And motion carries. 12.7. Just reports. Mover and a second, please. Councillor Morrison and Deputy Mayor, that the council of the municipality of Huron East received the first and second quarter financial variance reports of 2024. Any questions on the reports? All those in favor? And motion carries. Under correspondence. Mover and a seconder for 13.1, Brussels Bangers. It's moved by Councillor Newell, second by Councillor Morrison, that the council of the municipality of Huron East declare the Brussels Bangers Fastball Club first annual fall ball dance on September 30th, 2024 from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. a significant event. Comments or questions? Councillor Newell.
Brussels has been successful with hosting homecoming and Tigers tournaments, which are similar to what this event is, and so I would recommend that they follow the same process that's been shown to be successful for operating safe events, so working with staff on alcohol gaming commission, security, wristbands, those type of things. I would just recommend that that be looked into by staff.
Okay, so, in passing this motion, you're asking staff to share that information or recommend that they talk to those other groups?
No, sorry, to work with the Brussels bangers on ensuring that the event's successful through like the municipal alcohol policy or something to that effect, whatever is in place for a staff tool to use to make sure that the event's safe.
Yeah, and I'm assuming from when I read the information that they've done this event in the past because it talked about different things that they've supported in the community, including helping take care of the ball diamond and stuff like this. So I'm assuming they've already gone through this process a number of times. That's incorrect.
No, this is a
It's
first.
just for the special occasion permit, so you have to get the approval of the municipality for your special occasion permit. So that's what this is asking.
For the alcohol.
Mhm.
But they must have done other fundraising because they talked about different things that they put money towards, such as helping some people with their baseball careers or helping families pay some of those fees, helping some of the maintenance at the ball diamond it talked about.
And I don't know for sure, but I think this is like a first annual thing that they're trying to do.
Okay,
I don't know what other fundraising initiatives they've undertaken, but my take on this was that it's their first time doing something like this, so.
so would Lisa be the correct person for them to contact?
Yeah, and Lisa and I spoke today about it as well, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in this motion, we would be willing to approve, but also ask that they contact Lisa for assistance in
Work with staff, yeah,
to work with staff in making it a successful event. Is that good enough?
safe and successful, yeah.
Okay. All those in favor? And motion carries. Council reports. County council.
I don't think we've had a meeting since the last one I reported on, so.
Okay, I'm gonna bring up something that I haven't brought up to county council, but I hope to bring up tomorrow. I could have mentioned this earlier, but we had an incident at the recycling center. We have Huron County pays for our hazardous waste recycling center. Anybody can take stuff there. We don't charge. We want it disposed of properly. The county, it used to be 50,000 a year, and I think it's 60 or 65. They pay into that now. Somebody dropped off, and I think it was 5 skid loads of paint. And I think there was 12 5-gallon pails on each skid. The center wasn't open, so they just unloaded them at the front gate and left them there. That's not the reason I'm bringing it up. The reason I'm bringing it up is they weren't very smart. They're not from Huron County, and they still had their addresses and stuff on the outside of the gate. No, that's still not the part that's getting me. We phoned the OPP and the OPP says, no, we're not gonna do anything about it because you don't have a bylaw to prove that people can't drop stuff out on the side of the road. I am not very happy about a response like that with the amount of tax dollars that the residents of Huron County pay. And it's every resident of Huron County that's now paying for a product that came from a different county because we still have to pay for the disposal of it. We can't send it to somebody else.
Can you take it back to them?
Take it
No,
back to
we can't. The company was sold to another company and it was the company that was selling that had it dumped off because they didn't want to pass the expense on.
Does is the name not household waste?
Yeah, I did ask that question and there, let's call it a loophole, but the bottom line is, if we have a business in Huron County that has something, but it's not something they deal with on a regular basis, but they have a need to get rid of it, we're still gonna take it because we don't want people dumping it in the river, the ditch or anything else. So we've worded everything properly so that if it's your regular weekly waste that you've got from your own business, no, that's not what we're looking to do. But if you've got something that needs to be disposed of properly, we still want to be able to take it. So yes, we do call it household hazardous waste, but we will take other individual ones. So that wasn't justification, but the thing is that we still have no authority to go back and the OPP wouldn't. And I think there's a problem there that they brush that off. So I'm gonna bring that up at county council tomorrow. If I forget, please try my mind because that one irked me.
Bring a paintbrush with you, you won't forget.
Yeah.
Just under my reports, I was gonna report that my wife and I, we borrowed the township truck on Saturday and we attended the Bluebell 170th homecoming for their parade on Saturday morning. It was 11 o'clock and it was about a 3/4 of an hour parade. It was very good. It was a beautiful day, lots of people out, so I was glad that we went. I'd like to thank Barry and his team for renting a vehicle. It was kind of a last minute thing, but as usual, Barry looked after it. So thank you, Barry, and thank you to Joe as well.
Are there any other boards, committees, meetings or seminars? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I forgot to report about a couple Huron East community council meetings I've been at. That's the United Way Committee that we started up. First thing we hope to accomplish is to have a community market in C4/Brussels going forward next year, where people can come and buy grocery items at cost. They're doing it in Stratford and St. Mary's now twice a month. We visited the one in St. Mary's in July and they had over 100 clients come and purchased produce and such, and the prices were much lower than grocery stores, but they also liaised with the grocery stores and markets and told them that what they were doing, et cetera, and had no negative feedback at all from. And they've talked to the people in town here, Foodland and Cisco's and the Mill Street Market, and they're all for it, so. Anything they get donated, they give away. It's sounds pretty good. The only thing that surprised me was that they hope to raise $38,000 to $40,000 to cover the expenses of this in Huron East this year, so I have draw tickets if you're interested. No, it's gonna be a good first step for this group.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Deal.
Could I just ask Bob a question?
Yep.
So like a farmer's market type thing, Bob?
No, you go in with your grocery bag and you pick up a stalk of celery and 5 pounds of hamburger and a dozen eggs, and you go to the register and pay for it. And it can be anybody and everybody. Doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any requests by members of this? Oh, Councillor New.
Sure, I just wanted to report, council voted down the use of ATVs on the trail near Henfrin. And last night, North Perth Council also voted down the use of ATVs on that shared recreational amenity being the trail.
And consistency, that helps. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, request, we're getting back to school time, and I wondered if we could ask the OPP, maybe starting next week or the week after for a couple of weeks to increase their profile and have some speed. Whatever. Thank you, in school zones and where the buses are gonna be running and picking up students, just to remind the people who have forgotten for 2 months that they gotta watch out for buses and kids. So we could ask them for a couple of weeks of more intense coverage in Huron East residential and school areas. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
We will ask staff to make that request. I will comment about the fact that I don't know whether we have more OPP or whether it's just a different outlook, but I see a lot more doing radar checks in the last few months than I've seen in a long time. So they are doing a lot more of that for sure. It seems to be a bigger push in Huron County right now.
And I haven't, nobody's even mentioned it to me this.
Well, if we're not getting tickets, we don't complain.
No, just even the visibility, Mr. Mayor, it impacts people for a while.
Yeah, okay. I did have a potential request, for either the deputy mayor or one of the members from Brussels. I was asked to do this and I've done it lots of times and I do enjoy doing it. But the Brussels Queen, competition is Wednesday night. I did actually have a family event. Now, if I have to cancel the family event and go to this, I will absolutely do it. But it's, held at the Legion in Brussels. And typically, all I ever did as mayor was, I would present a pin to each of the members and just a few, congratulations and greetings, from the municipality. It's not, you're expected to, say any long speech, but if any one of the three of you, which would make the most sense, were available and willing to do it. I think it's at 7 o'clock at the Legion. I can confirm that tonight before I leave. If one of you was willing to do it, that'd be great. If not, I will still do the job then.
I'm already.
Okay. If you
I
can,
just need-
I will.
Sorry, the date again?
It's this, tomorrow night
Tomorrow night.
at the Legion at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, already committed, sorry.
Okay?
I can do it.
Okay.
As an ex-society member, I probably should already be there, so
Okay.
I will be there tomorrow night.
If you stop in downstairs, the staff have Huron East pins. Make sure they give you, more than you think you need, because you do not want to run out. That does not look good. I've taken one off my coat before. Yeah, definitely hand one out and if you talk for 2 minutes, that's all they want to hear from you because they're there to hear the other speeches anyways. Okay, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Are there any notice motions at this? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last night I got an email, I think we all got an email on, pertaining to, battery farms. So I'd like to serve notice of motion that I'd like to bring a motion forward, next meeting for discussion. And we declare here in East an unwilling host for battery farms on prime agricultural land.
Okay. Are there any other notices of motion at this time? Seeing none, are there any announcements at this time? Deputy
I
Mayor.
also have one, my wife sent some barbecue tickets for, the fair. Coming up, we also have a council meeting, I believe, that same night, so if anybody wants to, grab a bite to eat before we go to the meeting, it's on Tuesday, September the 17th in Brussels. Tickets are $25 a piece, so I will have them at the next meeting with them.
I will, I do not have cash on me, but I will take tickets for that. Absolutely.
Ask the question.
Don't usually meet in Brussels.
Yes,
Will we have the council meeting in Brussels that night?
we've done that in the past. I was actually a little surprised,
Jess has got the schedule.
but what we've done in the past, I think, is that I thought we started at a half hour later so that I could give the opening comments and then we have the council meeting at the library.
Last year we did it at the library because the BMG was under renovations.
Right.
So I think the plan is to do it at BMG for this year, I believe was the plan.
You'd have to do it upstairs.
But that's the, Yes.
Fair will be occupied,
That's why.
Yeah.
bring it up.
But they still have that little room upstairs.
It's not used.
What's that? Well, what? Oh, it's a good size,
I don't know if they've been covered it then.
yeah. but
Would you rather go to the fair or watch a council meeting?
And plus, there's all that viewing room as well. I think it'd be a lot big enough, I think.
I think it's comparable to the library.
Yeah, I was
Yep.
gonna say, for
Yep.
sure. Yeah, it is.
Yep, for sure.
We've used it before.
Yeah, we have.
what we can,
Cheers.
if it's okay, if I can confirm scheduling at the BMG as well as the Brussels Library, and then we can kind of make a motion on September 3rd, just to get that final verification of the location, just so that I don't want to promise something in the space that is available.
Right.
Okay.
But either way, you still have to eat. so.
Yeah, I'm still gonna be there. So if I understand correctly, we're either gonna try and do it in the room upstairs, or we will find another location in Brussels and hopefully start at 7:30. Okay, great, thank you. We are at bylaws. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Deal, second by Councillor Chartrand, that be it hereby resolved that bylaw 58 of 2024, a bylaw to temporarily close Gowan Lock Street, Seaforth for the Seaforth Homecoming 2025 be given first, second, third, and final readings, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. All those in favor? Carried. Mover and a seconder for bylaw 59, Counselor Deal and Deputy Mayor. That be it hereby resolved that bylaw 59 of 2024, a bylaw to provide an exemption for park lot control 16-26 Linda Drive, Seaforth, be given first, second, third, and final readings signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. All those in favor? And motion carries. Bylaw 60, mover and seconder. Counselor Deal, Counselor Morrison, be it hereby resolved that bylaw 60 of 2024, a bylaw to provide an exemption for park lot control 757-759 Anderson Drive, Brussels, be given first, second, third, and final readings signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. All those in favor? Motion carries. Bylaw, no, we are not going into closed. We are not going to do that. Confirmatory bylaw moved by Counselor Steffler, second by Counselor Newell. That be it hereby resolved that bylaw 61 of 2024, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council be given first, second, third, and final readings signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. All those in favor? And motion carries. And motion to adjourn. Counselor Deal, Counselor Fisher, that the time now being 7:51 PM, the regular meeting do now adjourn until September 3rd, 2024 at 6 PM. All in favor? Motion carries.